Jewish scholars, 6 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, to translate the Torah from biblical Hebrew into Greek. And when the king had compared what the translations were, and although they were in different chambered rooms, God spoke to all of them, or empowered all of them to translate the same thing. So the first translation was pure. But since then, it's been translated so many times in so many different languages. I think it's in 600 different languages, and it's been translated over 1,500 or 1,500 times. And so we have to know how to read and understand where the truth is and where the additions are. And as always, I like to bring in some diversity and someone to share conversation with. And so I welcome my good friend Martin Turner to the show. Welcome to the show, Martin.
Okay.
It's 5 things that we still practice as people during slavery. And the enslaved Americans, they were taught to fear and devalue African religions. And many Black people across the world still use the King James Version. Mm-hmm. And I know the first translation was pure, but we know how words are when you
translate them.
Yeah. Can you give us some clarity or insight or diversity on that?
Well, the original text were actually not translated, but were supposed to be written in Aramaic, which is what the Quran is written in. But they were translated into Hebrew, which is kind of an Aramaic, and eventually into Greek and Latin. Now, all of these are very recent languages, Latin and Greek. So there were concepts and there were words that are foreign to them because they have no parallel meanings in certain languages.
Right. So, Mark, what do we do with that for people that's discovering spirituality, that's not afraid to explore African spirituality or study the beliefs? And like the Bible, I still use my Bible. I feel like it's full of good things that we can use and benefit from. And that being what we were given, I don't throw it away. I don't talk down on other religions. In fact, my daughter just called me an omniist the other day, and I'm like, what is that? And she was saying, well, omniist is somebody that respects all beliefs in our religion and their gods. And I do, because I can see the parallels in all of it. We might call it one thing, but somebody else is calling it Olodumare because they're different, speaking a different language, or Allah. What's your thoughts on that?
No, but if you go back to the book of Acts,
okay,
where they were given the Holy Ghost, so to speak. One of the tenets that people always misinterpret is that they were speaking in some kind of an unknown tongue. But the book of Acts expressly states all the nationalities and all the people that were there at the time gathered in Jerusalem. And it says very specifically, literally, everybody in that location heard about the wonderful works of God in their own tongues. So there were no foreign tongues, because everything that was happening was being translated into everybody's tongues. So you would be not mistaken what or whom was being professed at that time. Now, the problem with English is that it's the latest language, or let's call it the youngest language on the planet right now. Mm-hmm. So English contains Greeks, it contains French, it contains Latin, it contains German. Almost all of nationalities have a stake or a contributing factor in English.
So would you call that a bastardized tongue?
That's exactly what it is. But you have to understand one thing. The English people were the last people to conquer people on the earth. The Anglo-Saxons, so to speak. They were the last conquerors. That's Great Britain and all those ilk over there. But even after they had already pretty much conquered a lot of the so-called world, the free world, they were also in league with other nations. And particularly, what these European leaders devised and what they kind of deduced was that if we kept ourselves interrelated, there would be a whole lot of conflict avoided. So the Austrians, the Belgians, the Poles, the French, the Germans, and the England, all of their nobility were related, cousins or what have you, in-laws and stuff. So they all had, common shared lineage, but different linguistics. And the English, particularly, when they were conquered by the Franks or French people, what the French did with them to keep them in subjugation for a long time was they took their language and they added French words to it. But only the English nobility were privy to this. And this was how they knew you were of nobility, or what they used to call aristocrats. Because when you spoke certain language, you used certain words. Today we call that jargon, or politically motivated words and so on. Some call it legalese, if you want to call it that.
Would that be pidgin as well?
Yes. So that stuff lasted up until like the 1800s. So it was very recent that the French got out of the auspices of the English rather got out of the auspices of the French. So there are a lot of words that English nobility know that the commoners did not. And it was the commoners, this is what people need to understand, it was the commoners who were first shipped to America because they were considered undesirables. There was no, let's go and explore the real world, this new world like everybody thinks it was. No, you had the Christopher Columbus and people like that, but their crews were made up of commoners. They had like navigators and people like that to run the ships and everything, but they wanted people to come over and work for them. So they picked commoners. And it's the commoners who rebelled against the British colony. And so our language became further dumbed down. Now you take the Bible itself, it's been translated over 600 times.
Yes.
So if you can remember when you were in grade school, I think everybody did it, where the teacher would take one person, take all the people and line them up into a line, take one person and whisper one word or two words to their ear and say, pass it on.
Telephone.
And at the end of that list, there was always a big disparity in what was said and what was heard. Now you take that little kind of like, I don't know, that's a little synopsis of human nature done in its purest form, because there is no political agenda, there is no motivation behind kids that lie. They just repeating what they think they hear. Now take that same nature, human nature, and juxtapose it over nobility or so-called aristocrats who have a vested interest in keeping people ignorant. When they translate that, the Bible, they're going to translate it into a language that the poor can only, surmise so much of what the actual motivation is, and thereby keeping them in control. Does that make sense?
Yes, a lot of sense.
So consider this then. Of all of the knowledge in the books that was kept from slaves, because there was a lot of it that was concealed. There was one book that they always left around for slaves to peek into and figure out. And guess what that book was?
The Bible.
There you go.
But see,
you never heard anybody anybody excuse me, anybody peeking into an algebra book or books on philosophies and things like that. No, they always left those things around because they knew they had prying eyes. Excuse me. They knew they had prying eyes, and they left that stuff around because they added things in, like when they the book of Ephesians, when it says slaves obey your masters as in Christ. That's not in the original text, so they added things into it. And even later still, you had that preacher, I might have mentioned this before, Schofield. Schofield was the one who first put forth the notion of the rapture. And yet you see it 3 or 4 times in the New Testament. But Schofield took his people, he was a Pentecostal minister in West Virginia, took his people, had them sell all their lands and all their goods and follow him up into the mountains and wait for the rapture. And when it didn't occur, he basically professed that he had his math wrong. And so he wasn't specifically sure when it was going to happen, but it should happen real soon. That was in the 1800s. And yet, that still remains in our Bibles today. And most of your biblical scholars, they know this, but they won't tell any of their parishioners, because every time you see a funeral, you'll hear them talk about, Thessalonians. You're going to see them again. You're going to see them again. Don't worry about it. You're going to see them again, because we're going to all be caught up in the clouds and so on. So here's a man-made construct that's been inserted into the Bible and been accepted as the Word of God. So
I feel like there's many things inserted by man into the Bible. Not especially, but one of the things is disconnecting us from our ancestors. And in America, this place is probably the least practiced, except for foreigners coming here, like the Asians, and you'll see their shrines and stuff like that. But us being not in, I guess, in the knowledge of that belief system, we look at it like, okay, they praying to the dead, not that those ancestors live in us. And because we are able to do different things, those ancestors are living in us. And so to me, the African teachings rely on your self-empowerment, letting you know that everything is inside of you. That you have the ability to do these things, whereas Christianity demonizes a lot of your birthright or inheritance, and it also inserts that fear and just staying in the dark about a lot of things. You're not supposed to read anything but the Bible.
The one word you use there that sticks out whenever I hear about Christianity is fear.
Yes. That's
one of the most effective tools for controlling the human psyche, fear. Because fear elicits irrational thinking. And it also makes people who are perceived as weak seek out the strong for protection. Now, one of the most important elements in religion was that it was always hoarded, or if you want to call it that, by the aristocrats and the rich people. That was one of the problems that Martin Luther had with Christianity when he was talking about the book of Isaiah. I believe it was chapter 61, when it said, arise and shine, and so on, and see the light and so on. And he questioned the Catholic hierarchy about why does it say this stuff is for all people and you are hoarding it for yourselves. He was soundly excommunicated. So he started his own, movement, and we call that the Lutherans. Now, the Lutherans is very close to as actual Catholicism, Catholics itself, but it was purported to be a religion for the common people. And so they just put put forth the notion that this is a religion of poor people, it won't catch on because these people need us. And that's how it is today. I was just reading on Twitter about half an hour ago because I'm waiting for some of my work to dry up in here. So I'm sitting there looking on Twitter, and there was a post where somebody said, now I understand why these people follow Trump the way they do. Because if you go down south, in certain states, that's the only communication you're going to hear on radio stations and TVs and so on.
Mm-hmm.
They've monopolized all of the airways, and all you hear is right-wing conspiracy and Christian nationalism. So if that's all you hear 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it has a tendency to ring some truth to you.
Yeah.
Because, we learned even when I was in the military that if you just reinforce something for 7 straight days, 21 straight days, 3 weeks, you will establish a law within your members in your mind. That's why it was so important for us when I was in boot camp to stick to a certain regimen religiously so that you could establish this thing in your mind as a natural law, and you would do it reflexively.
Mm-hmm.
That's also why we drilled all the time. And every time we drilled the exact precise way, the exact precise sequences every time. And it came to a point where you could anticipate those moves. And if they knew you were doing that and they hesitated for a minute, it would throw the whole platoon off. And they would say, stop. They would halt the platoon and say, stop anticipating and just listen. That's how closely in tune we were with that habit. We started expecting it so much that you could almost do it before they even said it. And they didn't want that because you might be somewhere in a critical area like combat, anticipating a certain command and it don't come, and then you react to it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So they had you slow down your thought process and just do what you were commanded to do. In other words, don't think, just react.
All right. Well, Martin, what do you think? Now I'm going to go back to the Bible because, that's what we were given and we know that.
Mm-hmm.
We're learning other things, but we know that. And I like to take biblical scripture and use them in what I'm learning, and my aunt told me one time, sifted through the Bible, and I find myself doing that a lot. But in Matthew 6:22, it states that, it said, what did Jesus mean when he said that eye is the lamp to the body?
Well, just like it says, this is the thing that I learned when I was reading the Bible and learning in Bible school. What does a lamp do?
Illuminates.
There you go.
Brings light and
that's what it does. And see, what I learned through my Bible scholarships and everything was that when you interpret things, you get it wrong. Just say it like it is and leave it alone. When you start trying to put man's philosophies or your own little notions into stuff, you're going to go wrong every time. Mm-hmm. So when a pastor always said, listen, you were born in America, you speak English. God knew you was going to be like that for this period in time, and so he provided you with a language you could understand, English. And English is very plain. It's very, very plain. So when it says that, that's what it means. Now, people always talk about the Illuminati, and I'm like, do you listen to what you're saying? That's not some kind of a cultist concept. It's just telling people who are enlightened.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it means.
But it's been so demonized to know or to deviate from the drill, and when you do, you are all these other things besides a Christian or a worshiper of God or the Most High or however you see your Creator. But when we refer to the light, having good eyes, we only see well, but also perceive well. But when we don't, it makes things kind of difficult to understand.
Well, who do you think Who do you think it is that's always critical of that stuff, though?
I don't know. Tell me.
Well, when I was going through Bible college, I was pre-warned that I would encounter a slew of preachers from around the area who were just basically ignorant. They were coming to get this certificate thinking that this certificate is going to carry some weight because of who was giving it out. You got this doctor of theologian with also he had he was on the way to getting his doctorate in medicine before he was directed to theology instead. So this is a very intelligent individual. He's no dummy. So his certificate is going to carry some weight in the community. So they was expecting to come and simply go through the motions, but they didn't realize he was going to put them through the same rigors as the novices. And so what I discovered was there were like not just a few, almost every pastor that I encountered there was basically ignorant. I mean, I can't really sugarcoat that. I should be thinking to myself, how do you not know that and you're a pastor? You know, we're discussing the ABC stuff, just the rudimentary things, as they want to call it. The stuff you would lead a person into salvation with, the Lord's Prayer and things like that. And you had preachers who had no clue what they were talking about. They just parroted it because they'd heard it and it had been passed down to them.
Practice.
And they didn't take the time out to reflect on what they were actually saying.
A practice life and not
And that used to
live.
just totally, my pastor would say, listen, I don't want you to get the big head. I don't want you to think you're some kind of special individual. I want you to remain humble, but I want you to be aware of how fortunate you are to have gotten this teaching all these years. And you're going to see that now when you get among people who are from outside this fold, as we call it, how uninformed they are. And that was just two preachers, I ain't gonna say their names, but they had some pretty sizable ministries. And they would come in with their suits on, and this is college, I'm thinking everybody coming in dressed down. They come in with their suits on, and one of them actually came in with his little backwards facing collar thing they have on there. And so he looked the part.
Clergy collar.
Yeah, he looked the part. And he was the one that fielded the most questions. And the first time he was doing it, I thought he was just doing it to lead the pastor in the teaching. You know, like pretend you don't know so that he can expound on it for everybody else. That's what I thought he was doing. But then we'd be in between classes. We had some long classes. Some of them were like 3 hours long. And you'd be at the college for like 4 or 5 hours a day. So it was a very intensive, curriculum. And we'd be during a break between one of the classes, and then these preachers would be asking each other, what do you think of that? And I never heard of that. And I would be saying to myself, are you kidding me? Because I'm sitting there as a cameraman, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just kind of just sitting there sipping on a drink or whatever, and I'm never leaving the classroom. So I want to make sure that when pastor's ready to reconvene, the camera's ready to roll. And so I'm listening to these guys and their conversations. And all I could see was like, who the hell put you in charge of some congregation and you don't even know the ABCs of what you're supposed to be believing in?
Well, Martin, that started back on the plantation. When they decided to offer Christianity back to the slaves, they put first they found the malleable preachers that they could mold and say what they wanted them to say, and then they put them through their schools. And so we're still, when we're talking about Christianity, we're still operating under the constructs of colonialism.
Well, yes, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, colonialism is actually what drives our economy. It's what drives not just our religion, but it drives our nation.
Yeah.
Colonialism is what is why poor people accept the rich's rule without question.
Yes.
That's why you spend your money on really pricey things because the name is attached to it.
Right.
That's a
colonialism is white supremacy.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it has many faces and uses many tools.
Well, I mean, if you you don't understand that Christianity, as we know it today, is the number one tool of white supremacy, then you don't understand Christianity.
Yeah, but they think it's the same Christianity that was offered back in Ethiopia, and it was not. It's not.
Oh, not even close. Not even close.
No. Yeah.
That's the reason why those Jews over there in Israel have, on a wholesale level, rejected the Christians from Ethiopia as being Jews also, because they're like, you're not like us, and so we're not going to accept you as our equal, and nor as our brethren. Even though, in all likelihood, those people who are from Ethiopia predate the ones who are currently in Israel with their Christian beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
But see, that doesn't lend to white supremacy, so they reject that.
I agree. Well, what do you think that, I don't know, these practices, they do feed the protected Black community through the hardships we face, and when they had to be hidden and adapted and synchronized with the religious